Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and we are hunting the robots. Have an interesting concept, in my opinion. It's an interesting concept to talk about tonight. One that really kind of helped me to grasp some of the ways I think of things, and I'm hoping to be able to share it with you and kind of parse this out. As a lot of you know, when I do these conversations, when I do these videos, I'm having a conversation, right? I'm trying to figure something out. I'm not here to educate or to instruct or anything like that. I'm trying to figure something out. We're actively thinking, and I'm a very verbal processor for those who haven't figured that out already or might be new here. And so I ran into this concept in a couple of places. It's one that I think I've talked about in the past, but maybe I didn't articulate it very well. And I've been thinking about this a lot. There are a couple of concepts I've been thinking about a lot. I'm going to share one of them with you tonight. Now, I might do another video on the other one soon. But I try to avoid topics that tend to stream into the religious, although philosophy by its very nature will turn religious at some point. And so that might just be that might just end up being something I have to deal with. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please, actually, I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/JulianMcBain, and you do get exclusive content if you become a member. But there's something more important that I'm going to ask you to do tonight. And I'm filming this at night as I usually do. It's actually much later than normal because I'm putting this video together after Lodge, because I'm a Freemason. We had communication tonight, and so it's like 10:30 on a Monday night. But I'm gonna ask you to share this video. Just share it. All of the other things really help me, but one of the things that I'm fighting against is obscurity. And if I could cut through the static, if I could cut through the noise, I could grow even 10 or 15% faster would be amazing. So if you would please consider sharing this video, it would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so I've run into this in several places, talked about in different ways, but I think that this one really played it out the best. And it's really weird because I'm not a baseball guy, and it was a baseball allegory. Like, I'm really not. I'm not a fan of baseball. I think it's too slow. I totally appreciate the skill that the players have in playing the game. That amount of competence, I can truly appreciate what it takes to be a baseball player. But I'm not a fan of the game. I don't like playing it. I don't like watching it. It's not my thing. I have nothing against the game. It's not my thing. But it was great for this allegory, and it really made me think, because there's a couple facts about baseball that not many people know that are actually really important for you to understand. The first is, if you have a .333 batting average, you're a Hall of Famer. What does that mean? So, batting average is the number of balls per thousand that you manage to hit. Okay, number of times the ball is thrown at you that you manage to hit, and I think it can't be a foul ball, so it has to be good. If 333 out of every 1,000 balls is a hit, you're pretty much guaranteed to be a Hall of Famer. Now, what does that mean? That means you only have to hit the ball 1 out of every 3 times it's thrown at you. And that's really important to think about, because we always assume that we have to be perfect. And that is incorrect. We have to be competent. But even that's not necessarily totally correct. We have to be good enough. But there's a line there, because being good enough is adequate, but it doesn't mean we need to stop trying. Too many people become adequate and they just stop bothering. And I mean, really, on any lifelong endeavor, you know, and I think that the most the one we always joke about is the weather, the meteorologists, right? The weather people. Being the only job that you can be wrong 99% of the time and still keep your job is to be a meteorologist, and that's the joke that's always played. But really, no, it's not. That's not 100% accurate. Meteorology is an extremely difficult science because the air and wind currents can change at any time due to things that we don't even have proper ways of measuring. Gravity from the moon's a good one. To my knowledge, we haven't even figured out the way that the moon affects the tides on Earth. I mean, we have a general idea, and I'm sure that behind some paywall there's some really good research papers on it, but it's not general knowledge by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm willing to venture a guess that even the scientific knowledge on it is nowhere near where it needs to be for us to actually understand how it works. We don't even understand gravity very well. Like, to the point where it's being surmised that gravity is a dimension in and of itself, if you subscribe to, like, M theory or string theory. But so back to baseball allegory. So, if you can, what did I just drop? Oh, my phone. Lovely. If you can hit a ball 1 out of 3 times and be considered Hall of Fame level, that means that you don't have to be perfect. And this other one really ties into that because it really plays to that because it calls in something that I think it's a mistake we all make. This is a mistake we all make because, and I think that our parents are the ones who do this to us, and I'm as guilty as a parent as anyone of being like this. But the way it was from the Warrior Minded book that I just ordered, and I've got the audio, and I'm listening to the audio, and it's a really cool system to try to achieve, bring your life up to another level and achieve good in all aspects. At least one of which I'm missing totally, so I need to fix that issue right there, but, one thing at a time. But the idea is, when things come at you, don't swing for the fences. Swing for singles. Swing for singles. And that really knocked me for one, because I understand that life is an iterative game, and you got to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's a grind. It's a grind. It's a grind. I've always talked about it. It's a grind. It's a grind. It's a grind. But realistically, it's the swinging for singles that really makes the grind work. And that's a really strange thing to think about, because it's like you're not looking for, because when you swing for the fences, right? You swing, you try to make that home run. And you get the ball over there, or even better, the bases are loaded, you hit the ball, and it's a grand slam. It's a home run with the bases loaded. It's a grand slam. And it's out of the park, and you're all running around, and your team scores 4 points. That's great. The bases are empty. You've got the extra points. And baseball being a slower game, the score is not going to be huge. It's not like basketball, which is a very quick-paced game where you're going to have scores like over 100 points. It's a number of runs, and I don't know that I've ever seen a scoreboard where an individual inning, which is how the big game of baseball is played. It's 9 innings, and each inning is 3 strikes, and it's yeah, I'm not going to get into the mechanics of it because I know I'll get it wrong, and I'll probably have some baseball fan on here telling me why I'm wrong, and they'd be right to do so, because that's not a game that I play, and I don't understand it very well. But I get the concept of it. I used to play it as a kid because my cousin was huge into baseball. The number of games where we had ghosts loading the base. I see all the 1980s and 90s Americans out there nodding their heads. But But anyway, the idea is you don't win a game by trying to hit that home run. The majority of games are won on singles. So you hit the ball just far enough away so that by the time the ball gets back to you, or to the person on the base you need to occupy, or one of your teammates needs to occupy, they're already safe. And so, well, how does that translate into other things? It means when you're trying something new or when you're doing something, right? You don't try to get it all at once. Little pieces. You learn little pieces of the skill. So, for instance, right now as a Freemason, we're getting ready for our first initiation in over a year. Okay? And the role I play in this particular initiation is I'm going to be the one actually making the Mason. Because Masons are made. You don't join the Masons, you're made a Mason. And so I've got a lot of parts because I'm basically leading the initiation. Actually, I'm not basically, I am leading the initiation, which is a huge step for me because what the fuck. I did not expect to even come close to this for at least another year or two, but things happened and things progressed faster than expected, and hey, here I am. But I've got to learn the ritual, and it's all lines. Being a Mason, it's all about morality plays. You participate in morality plays, and like any play, like theater, the rituals have lines, and I have a lot of lines, and so I have to memorize the lines in iterative parts so that I can digest what I'm learning and continue to memorize. And so currently I'm working on one of two large speeches that I have to do within the play. And after hearing Go for Singles, I recalculated how to learn, and it's working. And what it is instead of trying to like read through the whole thing and then talk the whole thing and then read through the whole thing and then talk, no, wrong, bad. You learn the first two sentences. And then once you have those, learning two sentences doesn't take long, a day, maybe two, right? Learn the first two sentences. And then the next day, you add two sentences. And then you only practice by practicing everything you've already learned and the new things you've learned this week. So, or this day. So like today, I'm on the fifth and sixth sentences of this speech, of which I think there are there's like a dozen sentences to learn. Maybe a dozen and a half. And so I learned the first two lines, and then I learned the next two lines. And today I took on the third set of two lines. And what I did is that I first learned the sentences themselves, just spoke those sentences, and I did that like 2 or 3 times. I checked the ritual to make sure it was correct, and then I turned around and I added back in all the stuff before it. And so sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, sentence 4, sentence 5, sentence 6. And tomorrow I'll go back to learn the 7th and 8th, and I'll do the same thing. I'll repeat the 2 new sentences several times, and I'll go back to the top and repeat everything I've learned from the top. And I won't stop until it's correct. And that means I have to sometimes go back and check the stuff from before. But that's what it means, go for singles. And now I'm down to exactly 1 month because the initiation is going to be at a regular communication next month. And I have this speech and 2 other large speeches to memorize. One of which I already know the majority of because it's the actual obligation, the oath that you take. And that's pretty substantial, as well any good oath should be. But the other one, there's a second teaching segment and that I need to memorize, and that will take some time. And so I need to get this speech down. I need to get the next speech down. I need to start working on the next speech as quickly as possible without going so fast as to where I'm making mistakes, because that's what a lot of people do. They'll rush through and they'll start making mistakes. It's better to take the time and do it right, but push yourself. You got to give yourself a deadline, or else you're never going to learn how to do it. And so I'm glad I have this deadline. I knew it was coming. I kind of figured this would be the deadline. And we do formal practices every week, but I wanted to make sure that I had a deadline, so this forces me to push through. And so if I need to start doing 3 sentences, I will, but I prefer to do it 2 at a time, because I think that's really working. And that's what it means to go for singles. You don't need to push too hard on any individual thing. What is the next step you can take to make yourself slightly better? And this is true of your job too. Like, you're going to get a review at a job at some point, and it's going to be not where you want to be. It might be, frankly, it might be awful. Or it might be okay. But what you can do is you come up with an action plan, right? And it's like, okay, they're going to throw a whole bunch of shit that they want improved at you. Oh, okay, fine, fair enough. You know, you came out with a barely adequate review. Of course they're going to want a whole bunch of stuff to improve. But then you go back to your manager and you say, look, I understand we have all of these things that we need to improve, but that's a lot of different things to improve. How can I break this down in such a way that if I'm so far below par that this is a major problem, then what is the minimum ability that I need in everything so I can at least get it up to that? And once you have that, because that might be an iteration all its own, and that can be hard. That can be really hard, because the best way to do things is you take one piece of all of the things that you're inadequate at, and you focus on a minor improvement. So let's say you have to, I don't know, create a number of widgets, or you have to sell a certain number of units, right? And you are, let's say if you're expected to sell 100 units a month, but you only sell 50, right? Well, okay, why are you only selling 50? Well, there's a number of things that it might be. It might be your script. It might be the way you persuade. You might just let one objection take you out of the loop. It could be that you're just not suited for the role, but that doesn't help you any if that's the job that you have. And a lot of times you need to do sales before you can move into other roles. So, okay. How do you overcome that? Well, you take one piece. And maybe part of the problem is you haven't memorized the script. So that's what you do first. You make it your objective to memorize the script, and you do exactly what I'm doing with my Masonic script. You memorize it 2 sentences at a time. And no matter what happens in a given day, you make sure that with every call you hit those 2 sentences precisely. And then you do your best with the rest. And then the next day you add the next 2 sentences. And those 4 sentences now have to be done precisely. And you figure it out with the rest. And as you go, you add to that script. So as after you've, the average sales script is only a paragraph long or so, maybe 2. So let's say it's a dozen sentences. After a week and a day, you've got the whole script down, and then you spend 2 or 3 days making sure, polishing it up and figuring that part out. And if that part's done, great. Now you've got the script, and the script's part of the process. And more often than not, half the problem that salespeople have, and I'm using sales as an example because I manage salespeople, and it works exactly the same way. If you work in a call center, you can do the same thing. You just have to look at it from a more numbers point of view, because you make X number of dials, and if you can only manage to make 20 dials in a day, but the objective is 30, then the next day you go for 21, right? And that's how that works. And so, you finish the script. Well, that's great. You can get through the whole script now, and that's fantastic. Well, now you need to figure out how to handle objections. And so you come up with, okay, no matter what they say, you always disallow the first objection. You always find something to pivot to as opposed to the first objection. Or maybe you find the most common objection, because there are like only 5 or 6 common objections. So those are the ones that are always kill the call. Some of them you can't help. If they hang up the phone, well, you're kind of there's nothing you can do about that, right? I mean, you can call them back, but they're just going to hang up on you again. But if they say like, well, I'm busy. Okay, well, what can you do to overcome that objection? And if they give you a second objection, then fine, you let it go for the day, right? And then let's say you spend a whole week, because overcoming objections is hard. People don't like that shit. And you don't like it either, because it means you've basically got to say, you know, I'm not taking no for an answer this time. And then the next week you find a way to overcome 2 objections per call. Now each call is getting a little bit longer, but that's okay, because you're going to see more sales, and so that's going to help your sales numbers, and that's how that's going to work. And it's the same idea. It's the exact same idea. And you just work on each individual aspect. And this literally works just about everywhere. There's very few things that you can do that this idea will not work on. You know, when it comes to becoming a better parent, one of the... And again, you're not given a manual to be a parent. Now, as it happens, I am very lucky in that I have a parent, myself, who is essentially a manual on how to raise children, because she's been working in early childhood education for 35 years. I mean, you can't get a better 25 years. 25 years. She's not that old yet. But you know, I've sat at a table, you know, when I have questions, my mother, who has been doing early childhood education almost my whole life, certainly my entire adult life, but a good part of my childhood too. She was my own preschool teacher, for Christ's sake. So when being a single father, I enlist her help to talk with the school, because she used to work for the school, and when you have a former employee, the teachers don't bullshit you. and so we're there, and sitting at the table, you know, I'm sitting with like 8 people at this table, all of which are in education except for me, and I'm like, okay, I know for a fact I'm sitting among about 100 cumulative years of experience and education in this field, and the person who has the most of the experience is sitting next to me on my side. That is a useful damn tool to have, and I am very fortunate for it. But for the average parent, and even for myself to a certain extent, but really for the average parent, there is zero manual for raising kids, and so you got to figure it out over time. And so you end up running into a situation. The child's misbehaving, and so, you know, part of your job as a parent is to civilize your kids, and especially before like the age of 4. And so, one of the people that all early childhood educators need to deal with is Piaget, and Piaget was a phenomenal psychologist, someone that I am actually going to look for books on. I have not studied much Piaget. I did a little bit in college, but he was like childhood expert, right? This is a guy who at the age of 10, he wrote papers at the age of 10 that impressed people. Okay. Well, one day he gets a letter because of a paper that he did, and I don't remember what the paper was on. I'd have to look it up. He gets a letter, and because of the work he had done in this one field, a museum dedicated to that field offered him a curatorship. Okay. His parents had to write the museum back and say, sorry, but our son is 10. So he needs to like go to school. You know, and I mean that's a pretty smart, that's a smart cookie right there. Like, I got nothing on this. I take pride in my intelligence. I have nothing on Piaget. And so Um, and so, yeah, I was going somewhere with this. Oh, there's no manual for being a parent. So let's say you have a thing that you're trying to prevent your child from doing because it's not good for them. But you have to stop them over and over and over and over again, and you can't give up. But as a parent, sometimes you give in. And that's bad because it teaches the kid that they can wear you down. But, you're an adult and you got shit that needs to be done, and sometimes you run out of the patience of there, and there are two things that can happen. Either you give in or you yell at them. And neither one's really going to solve the problem. If you give in, then of course they're going to freaking do it again. And if you yell at them, well, then that's not really helpful either, because a shout to a child doesn't really tell them anything. Especially if it's one of those really good growling shouts, because it's essentially like a dog barking to a child. If you're shouting at your child, they're not hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth. They really aren't. They're just hearing anger. They're hearing the emotion. And none of the things you're saying is going to get through to their brain. And this is something I had a hard time with. This is something I had a hard time figuring out. I was an adult before I figured that out, because what happened was I had an incident where I was living with another person, and she was upset over something, and I don't even remember what she was angry about. She was correct to be angry, because it was something that we weren't doing correctly. But I was asleep. And so literally all I heard was anger. And so afterward, I go back to her and I'm like, what happened last night? Like, I don't even know what was going on. And she's like, what are you talking about? You were arguing with me. It's like, I wasn't even awake. I'm dead sleeping, and then all I hear is shouting, and I start shouting back because I'm not awake, and I don't even know what I'm saying, right? All that's coming out of my mouth, as far as my sleep-addled brain is concerned, is response to shout, right? And it occurred to me that that's how I dealt with a lot of my childhood, because in Vermont, the traditional way that, the tradition that children are, to just obey, it was very, very real for a very long time. And even to this day, in a lot of cases, it's still the case that that's how kids are raised. And to a certain extent, that's good, because a child that does not follow the rules will not be able to operate within a social structure. But at the same time, the parent has to be flexible enough to understand that not all children are the same. Every child learns differently, and every child's going to have different limits. And understanding what those limits are and figuring out what the needs are is a key part of you being a parent. And so, okay, well, how does this go back to swinging for singles? Well, here's the thing. Every time you have a situation with your child where you deal with something, okay, and you're not going to get it perfect, because no one does. I've had a lot of experience, and I know I fuck it up every time. But I fuck it up less every time. And that's the important part. You get closer and closer to that polish, to that perfection. You'll never be perfect at it. By the time you're perfect at being a parent, all your kids will have kids themselves. That's why grandparents are beloved by children, because the grandparents have finally figured it out, put themselves together enough to figure out what the hell they're doing. And by that time, they've already, completely broken their own children, because they were never taught how to do things properly, because, well, you can't really teach a person how to be a parent if they're not a parent. And this is actually something I've learned the hard way, because being a single parent, I have dated after my son's mother, and with the exception of the one person I dated that was already a parent, none of them knew what the hell was going on. And it's much harder for a step-parent, because they're not stepping into it from day one, when the child is nothing but really a set of motor functions and responses, essentially speaking. I mean, a baby, when a baby comes into the world, right? To us, a baby is nothing but potential. And that's basically what a baby is. It's zero. It's nothing but potential and a few relevant motor functions, right? The baby comes into the world knowing how to eat, knows how to shit, knows how to cry. And it's got differentiated cries, except my son. Well, no. Okay, no. I'm sure he would have had differentiated cries, except he was always pissed off. You know, most babies, they have a hungry cry, they have a diaper cry, they have a mad cry, they have a tired cry. And this is all true, but even like experienced people were like, he's just always angry. And it's like, no, he's not just angry. He's angry because he's tired. He's angry because he's hungry. And I've told my son this story, and he laughs every time I tell it to him, which is why I'm comfortable telling it to you. But it's, we actually kind of figured out. We ended up basically developing a checklist, like not a literal checklist, but a checklist where it's like, okay, he's angry. Why is he angry? Let's start with the diaper, and the diaper's clean. Okay, what next up is the food, because you're already holding him at that point. So obviously, if he's still pissed off, it's not because you didn't hold him. And sometimes he was just angry because he was overtired and still awake, but he was too angry to go back to sleep, so that pissed him off even more. And so, but these are the things you do, and so you're like, okay, we had X situation, it didn't go the way I wanted, and it obviously didn't go the way they wanted, so how do you fix it? Well, this next time, we're going to alter one piece of what we did. We're going to consciously make the decision to do that. Okay, did it go a little better? Yes. Good. Did it fix the whole thing? No. Okay. What's the next thing that we can alter? And you do that. And you do it over and over and over again. And by the time your kids are teenagers, you'll have a good chunk of it figured out. And then they go through puberty, and then you wipes the whole damn thing out again. But it does work. It does work. And like, my relationship with my son is pretty much better than my relationship with almost everyone else, period. There might be one person in all of the world that I might have a better relationship with, and that's very, very questionable. Very questionable. And that person happens to be my mother. And so that's important too. So swing for those singles. Swing for those singles, because that's how life works. And as soon as I heard that, I realized that's what I was screwing up. Because there was a certain part of me that constantly wanted to just like blow things away. It's like, no. Swing for the singles. It'll come. So, okay, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and we'll see you in the next one.